In the summer of 1914, the world ignited in a blaze of gunfire and glory. But beneath the trenches and the thunder of artillery lay a darker war, one fought not with bullets, but with banknotes. This is the story of how World War I didn't just slaughter millions, it bankrupted an entire continent. Europe, once the cradle of empires, emerged from the ashes drowning in debt, its wealth shattered, its power stolen. And the real victors? They weren't on the battlefield. They were in the boardrooms. Welcome to the hidden history of money, power, and collapse. Picture Europe before the storm, a glittering web of empires, from London's financial heart to Berlin's industrial might. The continent ruled the world through gold-backed currencies, the British pound, the French franc, the German mark, all tied to the unyielding shine of gold reserves. Global trade flowed like blood through veins, colonies shipped raw materials, factories churned goods, and investors poured fortunes into bonds with unwavering confidence. On the surface, it was an unbreakable fortress of wealth. But dig deeper, and the cracks appear. This system relied on peace and trust, fragile illusions in a world of rivalries. National banks held limited gold, and economies balanced on the edge of overextension. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand fell to an assassin's bullet in Sarajevo, that fragility shattered. Europe wasn't rich because it was strong, it was rich because no one had tested its foundations. The guns of August roared, and with them came the end of an era. Total war demanded total resources, millions of men, endless ammunition, vast supplies. But gold? It couldn't keep up. Governments faced a brutal choice: stick to the gold standard and starve their armies, or abandon it and unleash the floodgates. They chose the latter. Britain suspended gold convertibility in 1914, followed swiftly by France and Germany. Printing presses became the new frontline weapon, churning out fiat money untethered from precious metal. No longer limited by vaults, nations could fund destruction without restraint. But this was no victory, it was a pact with the devil. The gold standard, that pillar of stability, crumbled under the weight of war's insatiable hunger. And once broken, it could never be mended the same. Empires don't fight wars with pocket change, they mortgage their souls. Britain, France, and Germany didn't draw from overflowing treasuries, they borrowed from the future. Massive war bonds were sold to citizens and allies, promising riches post-victory. Britain alone raised over £7 billion in loans, equivalent to trillions today. France issued national defense bonds, while Germany printed war loans that sucked in every mark from its people. These weren't payments, they were illusions. Real wealth, factories, farms, labor, was diverted to the front, leaving economies hollowed out. The Central Powers borrowed internally, inflating their way to ruin, while the Allies turned to foreign lenders. It was a house of cards built on promises, where victory meant repayment, and defeat meant oblivion. But in the end, no one truly won. Debt became the chain that bound Europe long after the armistice. As Europe tore itself apart, a new power watched from across the Atlantic, and cashed in. The United States, neutral until 1917, became the arsenal of the Allies. American banks loaned billions, $2.3 billion to Britain and France alone, while factories supplied weapons, food, and steel. J.P. Morgan orchestrated the flow, turning war into profit. By 1918, America had flipped the script, from debtor nation to the world's creditor. Gold reserves swelled in New York vaults as Europe's drained away. The U.S. economy boomed, unemployment vanished, and Wall Street rose like a phoenix. Europe emerged shattered, owing fortunes to its savior-turned-master. The old world order flipped, power shifted west, leaving a continent dependent and destitute. In the game of empires, America didn't fight, it won without firing a shot. The war ended in 1918, but the financial execution came in 1919 at Versailles. Victorious allies, drowning in their own debts, demanded reparations from Germany, 132 billion gold marks, a sum designed to cripple. It wasn't justice, it was vengeance wrapped in economics. Germany's economy, already ravaged by blockade and inflation, buckled under the weight. Hyperinflation followed. By 1923, a loaf of bread cost billions of marks. Unemployment soared, savings vanished, and resentment festered. This wasn't peace, it was a powder keg. Financial pain bred political rage, fueling extremists like the Nazis. Versailles didn't end the war, it prolonged it, turning economic ruin into the seeds of another catastrophe. Europe's leaders signed a treaty, but they authored their own downfall. World War I redrew borders, toppled thrones, and buried generations. But its deepest scar was on the soul of money itself. The gold standard died in the trenches, replaced by fiat currencies and endless debt. Governments learned they could print their way out of crises, or into them. Inflation became a tool of power, empires collapsed under borrowed weight, and the cycle of boom and bust was etched into history. Today, we live in that shadow. Central banks wield printing presses like weapons, debts pile higher than ever, and fragility hides behind confidence. World War I wasn't just the war to end all wars, it was the bankruptcy that birthed our modern financial nightmare. Empires rise on gold, but they fall on paper promises. Remember, the next collapse might not come from guns, but from the quiet hum of a printer.